Hello and welcome to One on One. My name is Fumi Onuajefe, and my guest today is Daniel Ebitebe Alabrah. He's the Chief Press Secretary to the Bayelsa State Governor. We'll be talking about so many things: his life in Lagos, football, what's happening in Bayelsa, journalism, media, everything. So, welcome with me, my guest. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you so much, Fumi, for having me.
It's
my pleasure being here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So let me ask you first, what was your growing up like in Lagos? It was very interesting for me to, when I was reading your profile, you grew up most of your life in Lagos before you went to school in Port Harcourt or university.
Yes. Well, life growing up in Lagos was quite interesting.
Okay.
Lagos at that time was not as boisterous as it has become now.
Yeah.
We had this family, this community way of living.
Okay.
I actually grew up in Ajegunle, the place we call AJCT.
Okay.
It's a place of discovery. It's a place where we could exhibit our talents. On the streets, we were able to exhibit what God has given to us, particularly those of us who started playing football at a very young age. And life in Ajegunle was for those of us who didn't come from affluent families. We had very humble beginnings, and then we lived a life of looking out for the other person, a life of sharing, a life of do I say camaraderie? In those days when we went to primary school, we didn't have school buses. I went to public primary school. We trekked, several kilometers to get to school. It's not like these days where students go to school chauffeur driven. Primary school and secondary school was basically the same thing. We catered to ourselves. But the good thing about it is that it made us very streetwise. We learned life on the street. I was involved in football at the youth level, playing for the Greater Tomorrows in Lagos, in those days like the Youth Academicals. Then I got into playing for the Youth Sports Federation of Nigeria, which at that time was like the national youth team. That's before the Golden Eaglets was formed, or before they named the national youth team the Golden Eaglets. We were the persons who who were involved in representing this country abroad. I could recall that in 1982, I was part of the youth fund team that went to Denmark and to Sweden, to Denmark, to Scotland. We went in 1983. We still went to Southampton. Went to Denmark again to defend the trophy we won in 1982. That's it. Under 17.
Yeah.
Under 17 Youth Cup. It's called the Dana Cup in Denmark, and we also had the Sotonia Cup in Scotland. We had the Aberdeen Youth Cup. Okay, that's the Sotonia Cup. It was in Southampton, while the Aberdeen Youth Cup was in Scotland.
So how did you balance that with school? How did you affect your studies?
Well, that's one of the things Ajegunle taught us. You learn to know how to balance, the hustling, so that one does not affect the other. And I went to the university, and I didn't do too badly. When I left the university, I went into full-time football as a professional. Now, played for several teams, particularly the one that left the greatest memory for me is when I played under the late coach, Joe Erico. We call him the Jogo Bonito coach.
Okay.
He also coached the Super Eagles. That was in Nepal, Lagos. So then I also played for the Niger Dock Football Club too. This was professional football.
So how did you now transform from being a professional footballer to a journalist to a media person?
I'm going to tell you. Now, you see, because I had a good, again, foundation, academic foundation. When I quit playing football in 1994, you know, at that time, I found out that my education needed to play a role.
Okay.
But getting a job wasn't easy. You know, sometimes when I see people these days and they say, life hard, though, things difficult, I went through it. There was, in fact, for a period of like 10 years, it was really struggle. You know, I had to squat with a friend, you know, in Ajegunle, because after I finished youth service, I went back to Lagos. I served in Benin,
Okay.
in present-day Edo State. I think that time it was Bendel State.
Bendel State, yes.
You know, so, I mean, when I started looking for a job, one day I went to a job placement agency. And that's why sometimes they say, if you don't know somebody, you know if you get work. Personally, I think I put a lie to that kind of belief of some people. I went to the job agency, and I saw on their board that a newspaper company was looking for proofreaders. Okay. Proofreaders are like the sub-editors, those people who correct
the grammar in sentences, yes.
In scripts that are being prepared for publication. So, and I told the general manager of that company, the manager of the company, that I could do this job. And he gave me a letter to, it's a community paper. It's called the Urobo Voice. Okay. You know, even though from there we also had the Niger Delta Voice. So that was how I went for interview in that newspaper. And lo and behold, I did well. The publisher was impressed. And that was how my journalism career started.
Interesting.
In the year 2000.
Because you started off as a professional footballer, and I would like us to talk about your thoughts on sports in Nigeria currently, and particularly to your state, Bayelsa. What do you think, the country can do? First of all, are you happy with the kind of attention Nigeria gives to sports and young people? And then in Bayelsa, how can we begin to identify and have great talents that can go around the world like you did when you were younger?
Well, to be candid with you, there's nobody, even the administrators, they are not happy about the state of sports in Nigeria.
So what do we do?
If anybody says we are doing the right thing today in Nigeria, I will not agree, even with the best of intentions. You see, maybe people should come and learn from what we are doing in Bayelsa.
Okay. And what are you doing in
Bayelsa? Because, currently, maybe I should start from Bayelsa, then we can look at
it, take it up here. Yes, please, carry on.
Okay. So, today, Bayelsa is like the hub of sports in Nigeria. In the last 3 years and counting, 3.5 years and counting of the Governor Doejiri administration, we have won virtually everything that we needed to. Every competition we went to. If Bayelsa is not first, we are second.
So what are you doing differently? What have you guys done?
Now, there's the first thing you have to know is that the motivation has to be right. The governor had something for that he had something going for him that he carried over into governance.
Which is what?
At some point in his political career and his political life, he was commissioner for sports.
Oh, okay.
During the Goodluck Jonathan administration when he was governor of the state. Yeah. So, and at that time, Bayelsa came fourth at the National Sports Festival. That was the first time Bayelsa made that record, had that record. Now, when he became governor, he first of all appointed somebody who is a round peg in a round hole, or a square peg in a square box or something.
The right fit.
He appointed the right person to administer, to be in charge of sports in the state. And, today there's nobody who doesn't know about Daniel Igali. He's an Olympic champion, even though he won the gold medal in Olympics for Canada.
Yeah.
But he is a Bayelsan. But this is a man who has brought all that he knows about sports to bear in what he does.
Okay, so this is very obvious that you're doing something very right in Bayelsa with sports. So we'll just have to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. So you can see that my guest is really just busting to go, but we need to take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. And if you're just tuning in, I have the Chief Press Secretary of Bayelsa State with me, the Chief Press Secretary to the Governor in Bayelsa State with me. So, interesting conversation about Bayelsa and what you guys have done to turn this, the sports team, the sports dream around. And we hope, let me just ask you can you share 3 tips that other states and even on the national level that we can take from you on how you have turned your sports team around? So I know you've already said one of the things is to appoint the right person, the person that is good, a perfect fit for that role. So what else do we need to do?
The other thing is that the motivation has to be right. Now, for instance, during the National Sports Festival, Bayelsa was the only state for the first time won medals in 23 sports. Then 2, at that same festival, athletes were rewarded from the festival. For every gold medal you won, there was cash reward for you, 200,000 for a gold medal.
Oh, fantastic! So
when you get a silver medal,
the athletes are
100,000.
Yes.
When you get 50, just like that. This was just motivation to win medals at the festival. After that, when you get back home, the governor receives the team and now makes another, announcement of reward for everybody, including those who didn't win a medal. The coaches, the officials of all the teams, the secretaries. So you see that even before you go for that competition, you are fired up. Now, the federal government should begin to look at a reward system for our athletes. When they are no more active, they will have something to fall back on. Some of us are fortunate to go to school, at least to go to the university and get higher education. Not every person is that privileged.
Okay, so Mr. Alabrah, I have to interrupt you now. Let's move from sports to politics. Let's talk about the amnesty program. There are talks and conversations right now about withdrawing that totally. The respected elder in the Niger Delta, Mr. Clark, has advised against it. What are your thoughts about it? Okay,
I guess you asked that question because you have seen in my profile that I was...
yes.
Okay, I was head of media and communication in the Presidential Amnesty Program from 2012, to September 2015 when I resigned, But honestly, that program has a lot of positives.
Okay.
Even though there are also the flips, there's also the flip side.
Yes.
But I would like to dwell on the positives.
Okay.
Before the pronouncement on the amnesty was made by the late President Yaradua in 2009, we knew the way the Niger Delta was. At that time, oil production, had been seriously affected. It had dropped to about 750 barrels per day, less than 1 million barrels per day. So the Nigerian economy was bleeding, virtually. So the government needed to needed to stop that bleeding. And one of the suggestions that came up at that time was for the government to grant amnesty to the youths of the region. At that time, they called them militants.
Militants, yes.
Yes, but we know after a while, we started referring to them as former agitators. At that time, the militants were blowing up pipelines. MEND in particular was at the forefront of deliberately crippling the economy of Nigeria, what we were getting from oil.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I was one of those who reported
the stories about.
Yes, a lot. I was deeply involved in reporting the Niger Delta situation at that time. I guess that was one of the reasons why I was even brought in as one of those who helped to fuel the crisis, as it were, through my frequent and constant reportage of the incidents in the region. I became one of those who had to also manage the program. Now, that is a program that has helped the economy of this country too. At least the government's ability to be able to stop that situation at that time, we now saw a rise in production of crude oil from the region, and Nigeria benefited from it. Now, at that time, there was a lot of kidnapping in the region, particularly expatriates.
Yes.
So when you mention the Niger Delta, the first thing that comes to your mind is insecurity.
True.
It's kidnapping. It's violence. It's thuggery. All those kind of things that were not palatable to the ears. So there was this fear that the region evoked. But with the amnesty program, insecurity became reduced to a level. And that is why today, people have also said that, look, if the government was able, even though I don't agree with that assertion, they saw how the government handled the amnesty program and brought insecurity to a manageable level in the region.
Okay, so Mr. Alabrah, I'm going to have to, we're going to need to wrap this up quickly because of time. But I want to ask you two questions. One, as a follow-up question to this, is that many people worry that in different regions, in different regions now, agitators are rising up. So, what is happening in the southeast, and what many people are going to start asking for is this amnesty program to forgive them, and then, we're trying to placate these people. My second question, and I want you to answer both because of time, is that recently the governor gave out 106 cars for palliatives in Bayelsa State. But we also know that very recently, the fuel price was increased to 600. I don't know, how much is it sold now in Bayelsa State?
About 620, 630. 620.
So my question is, how do we give these cars as palliatives and then not worry about the fuel to fuel the cars? How are we going to balance it out? What is the governor going to do to make sure that everything is, even and sorted?
First leg of the question about amnesty for bandits, as it were.
Yes, because in the north,
terrorists.
In the northeast, they were also, there's a program for them now.
Yes.
And many people say that it's because of what we've had in the Niger Delta.
But the Niger Delta militants were not terrorists. They were not killing people. That's the difference. They attacked the economy of Nigeria, but these people are taking lives. Those people there's no basis for comparison. Between the two, there's no basis. So those who live by taking the lives of others should also face what is prescribed for them, whatever the government thinks. So I will not subscribe to amnesty for bandits and criminals and terrorists.
What about in the southeast as well?
Whatever they are doing that is not right, for as long as you are taking life that you could not create, that is precious to God and human beings, I do not think, amnesty is the way. But what I will suggest is that, yes, if the government thinks, I'm not saying that decision is left for the government, yes, but as an individual, I do not think that those who live by killing, the government should not treat them with kid gloves. Wherever they are, even in the Niger Delta, if you do that, you face the same treatment. You understand? So I'm going to leave it at that. I do not want to make prescriptions.
Okay. And
you understand?
And that's a fantastic...
I think from what I've said, anybody could glean whatever
it is that they want to take
that
with it. That's a fantastic way to live it out. Yeah. So we'll take another break.
And we'll come back.
And when we come back from this break, we'll continue the conversation. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. I still have my guest with me, the Chief Press Secretary to the Governor of Bayelsa State, Mr. Daniel Alabrah. So just before the break, I was asking you about the vehicles. The governor recently gave out 100 cabs and 600 luxury...
six luxury.
Six luxury buses, I beg your pardon, 6 luxury buses to the citizens of Bayelsa State, and even encourage young people to take driving up as a career. But recently, the fuel price has gone up again. And in Bayelsa, it's 600 plus. So how do, the people who have taken these buses and these vehicles manage the fuel price increase and manage their vehicles? And you know that in Nigeria, once the price of fuel goes up, everything, motor parts, everything goes up.
Okay. Let me first of all give you the background.
Okay.
About the transport situation in Bayelsa. Before the governor rolled out those vehicles, the means of transportation in the state was basically by tricycles.
Okay.
There are cars. For instance, you have the private vehicles, but the government didn't have state intra-city or intra-city transport buses, vehicles. So now we had a situation in the state, I think in April, where there was a conflict between youths of a community and we call them the keke riders, the tricycle riders. So, and it led to loss of lives. So the governor had to wield a big stick and placed a restriction on commercial tricycles from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. So there was like 11-hour restriction. So, well, a lot of people hailed the decision at that time, and even now there are a lot of people who would think that it had helped the security situation in the state.
Okay.
Given that those tricycles don't move at night from 7 p.m., they don't move. So, but the other side of it was that it was affecting nightlife. Those who do business at night, it became a problem. It affected patronage. People could not move at night because even the private commercial vehicles that were, doing transport, that were involved in the carrying of passengers, their fares, the fare was quite high. So people were complaining. So the government said, okay, what do we do? Let us introduce vehicles. So the government started acquiring those vehicles. Since that time, we started acquiring the vehicles. Even before that thing happened, there was already a plan in place to roll out vehicles to ease the transportation situation in the state. All I know is that the fuel situation is not something that will remain constant. As it has gone up, the companies that got approval to import fuel, I hear the latest information I got was that the imported fuel will begin to come in anytime from now. It will also bring down the price, even though I'm not expecting that it will go back to 198.
I was about to say so, because in Nigeria, when anything goes up, it doesn't come down.
Yes, but
especially with the dollar rate to the naira.
That is on the other hand. That's the other situation. The problem is not even actually the cost of fuel. It's about the exchange rate of the dollar. The exchange rate, yes. So the government is grappling with two issues at the same time. You are grappling with the issue of the exchange rate, trying to bring it down, trying to bring it within manageable control. You're also grappling with the issue of the ripple effect of that high exchange rate on the price of the landing cost of fuel, which translates now to a higher pump price of fuel. So, yes, the point you raise is quite good, but the thinking of government is that these vehicles are like a palliative for the people. So we are not going to, the government will not charge fares that will be the same as that commercial private or private commercial transporters charge. So there will be a little differential. And these vehicles will, for instance, the luxury buses and even the cars will now go to other areas that you do not normally have vehicles going to, like
the outskirts,
like the university towns.
So just before we round up, I wanted to also talk about pensions in Bayelsa State. Recently, again, the governor, introduced and also backed it up by law, where there's a contribution from the government and a contribution. Yeah. Before this law, what had obtained in Bayelsa before?
You know, Bayelsa, pensioners in Bayelsa are, let me not limit it to pensioners. Let me say civil servants in Bayelsa, their welfare is a priority of the governor. Mm. You know, they've never had it this good. I can tell you. Even the civil servants and the retirees will tell you this. Now, one of the beautiful things that the governor has done with retirees is that the moment you leave service, you get your monthly pension. It has never stopped. No civil servant is owed in Bayelsa. No retiree is owed in Bayelsa. The only thing that is pending is that will be pending for you as a new retiree is your gratuity. Now, we had a backlog from 2007, 2008. Gratuity payment. So there was already a huge arrears. So the first thing the governor did was that from February 20 that he assumed office, he started releasing 200 million naira every month. In some months, it gets to 400 million. Sometimes, like in May last year, 500 million. They paid to the pensions board to take care of the gratuity. The backlog. So we have paid, this administration has paid the gratuity from 2007 to 2008 up to, like, in some local governments, 2015, some 2014, some 2013. And the beautiful thing about it is that you don't need to know anybody to get your gratuities paid. Hmm. They take your record. When it's your time, they will invite you. The pensioners or the retirees get their pension, and the civil servants, their welfare has been prioritized. Their promotion, the backlog of arrears or whatever they have, anything that is entitled to civil servants, this government has prioritized it, including making housing available to 1,000 civil servants through the federal mortgage bank scheme. Okay,
so this is not should I say, like a paid advert for Bayelsa State. So okay, let's hold it right there. Let's talk. Rounding up this, I want to talk about languages and how we're going to preserve the languages. How many languages are there in Bayelsa, and what is the the state doing? So earlier on, before the interview, you and I were talking about how, preserving our languages, yes, how we have to keep our children speaking those languages. How, are we going to preserve the languages?
Bayelsa is a homogeneous Ijaw state. It's the state in Nigeria where you have, you can call them one tribe.
One tribe, yes.
All of us, there's a primary language, or they call all of us Izon people.
Okay.
Now, in Bayelsa, what we have done is that the government has ensured, firstly, the previous government trained people in the university in his own language.
Fantastic.
So we have a foundation of, in terms of the personnel, this government came in and made it compulsory for his own language to be taught in primary and secondary school. It's in the curriculum of primary and secondary schools in Bayelsa. So we are so concerned about the language, preserving the language. In addition to that, the government now came up with one language that we can use that's an official communication language, yes, which is Kolokuma language. It's just a dialect.
Okay.
The Ijaw has dialects. Meanwhile, we have a general Ijaw language, but we have dialects. So today, the Kolokuma dialect is the official language for communication. I see myself as a professional in government.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is that if the opportunity comes, why not? Look, what I'm doing today is service. I see public office as a place of service. If the place of if an elective office beckons, and I think that yes, it's something that I can go for, I'm qualified to occupy any political office. But the truth of the matter is that that is not really what I'm focused about. I'm focused about serving my state in wherever I find myself. But elective office is not a priority for me. But if it comes, why not? It's an extension of my desire to serve.
And on that note, today we bring an end to this episode of One on One. I hope you've enjoyed, our conversation today, the stories about Bayelsa, his growing up, sports in Nigeria, what we can do to improve on it. And that's all we can take. My name is Funmi Onoajefe. Thank you for staying with us. Enjoy the rest of your week.